Standing naked on the auction block with no bidders in sight, Catherine Morrison had accepted that she was worth nothing to anyone, until a tiny voice from the crowd asked the one question that would change everything. When a desperate 4-year-old orphan looked past her shame and saw only possibility, would Catherine discover that sometimes the most valuable things in life are the ones nobody else wants to buy? The wooden platform creaked under Catherine's bare feet as another man walked away without even looking back. Her stomach twisted with hunger she'd felt for 3 straight days now. But the shame burned worse than the cold October wind, whipping through Silver Creek's dusty main street. "Come now, gentlemen," shouted auctioneer Mills, his voice cracking like old leather. "This here woman can work harder than most men. Look at those strong hands." Catherine's fingers trembled as she pulled the thin blanket tighter around her shoulders. Those same hands had once played piano in her family's parlor back in Missouri, before the fever took her parents and the debts took everything else. Now they were rough and scarred from months of scrubbing floors and hauling water just to earn a few coins for bread. The crowd of maybe 20 men shuffled their boots in the dirt. Some whispered to each other, but their words cut through the autumn air like sharp knives. "Too skinny. Looks sickly. Probably can't even lift a water bucket." Her heart pounded so hard, she thought everyone could hear it. Back in 1857, when she'd married Robert, people called her the prettiest girl in 3 counties. Her wedding dress had cost more than some families earned in a whole year. But Robert died of lung fever last winter, leaving behind nothing but bills from the doctor and the coffin maker. The bank took their house. The store owners took their furniture. Even her wedding ring had been sold to pay for Robert's medicine. Now here she stood, 24 years old, with nothing left to sell except herself. "What about you, Mr. Patterson?" Mills called to a tall man in a black coat. "Your wife's been poorly. Could use help around the house." Patterson shook his head. "Wife says she don't want strangers living under our roof, especially not someone who can't even keep herself fed proper." The words hit Catherine like a slap. She wanted to scream that she'd tried everything, washing clothes until her hands bled, cleaning houses until her back ached so bad she couldn't sleep. But nobody wanted to hire a woman with no family name to protect her reputation. $10! Mills tried again, his voice getting desperate. Surely someone needs a hard worker for just $10. Silence. A crow cawed from the roof of Murphy's General Store. A baby cried somewhere in the crowd. But no one stepped forward with money in their hand. Catherine closed her eyes and thought about the letter hidden in her coat pocket. The one from her cousin in California, who'd offered her train fare if she could just get to the station. But she needed $23 for the ticket, and after today, she'd have nothing at all. $5 then. Mills's face was red now, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool weather. $5 for a woman who can cook, clean, and mend clothes. More shuffling feet. More whispered comments she pretended not to hear. Desperate times make people do crazy things. Poor things probably diseased. Who knows what kind of trouble follows a woman like that around? Her cheeks burned with embarrassment. 3 months ago, she'd been Catherine Morrison, beloved wife and respected member of Pine Grove's community. People tipped their hats when she walked by. The preacher's wife invited her to tea every Thursday. Children smiled and waved from their yard gates. Now she was just that woman. The kind mothers warned their daughters about becoming. $2, Mills shouted, his voice cracking completely. Surely someone needs help for just $2. The crowd began to thin. Mr. Jenkins loaded his wagon with supplies from the store. The Stevens family climbed into their buggy, the mother pulling her children close as they passed the platform. Even the men who'd come specifically to see what desperate people might sell today started walking toward the saloon. Catherine's legs shook. She'd expected this might happen, but somehow she'd held on to hope that someone, anyone, would see past her circumstances and give her a chance. Instead, she felt invisible, like she was fading away right there on the platform. The silver locket around her neck felt heavier than usual. It held a tiny picture of her and Robert on their wedding day. back when they believed their love could overcome anything. She'd refused to sell it even when she had no food for days, telling herself it was all she had left of happiness. But happiness couldn't fill an empty stomach or pay for shelter when winter came. $1. Mills made his final attempt, but his heart wasn't in it anymore. Even he knew this auction was over. The last few men wandered away, talking about the weather and the price of cattle. Nobody looked back at the woman still standing on the wooden platform, still clutching her blanket like it could somehow protect her from the world's cruelty. Catherine's throat felt tight. She'd run out of choices, run out of hope, run out of ways to keep living. The workhouse in Denver would take her, but she'd heard terrible stories about what happened to women there. Some never came out again. Mills started packing up his papers and his wooden gavel. "Sorry, Mrs. Morrison," he muttered, without meeting her eyes. "Sometimes these things just don't work out." She nodded, not trusting her voice to work properly. Her bare feet were numb with cold as she stepped down from the platform. The few coins in her coat pocket wouldn't buy a hot meal, much less a place to sleep tonight. But as she pulled her coat closed and tried to figure out where to go next, something caught her attention. A small movement near the livery stable, where the shadows were deep and the afternoon sun couldn't reach. Someone was watching her. Someone so small they barely showed above the fence rails. Emma's stomach made angry growling noises, but she ignored them, just like she'd learned to ignore lots of uncomfortable things. From her hiding spot behind the water trough, she could see everything happening in the town square without any grown-ups noticing her. The sad lady on the wooden platform looked scared and cold. Emma knew exactly how that felt because she'd been scared and cold for 4 whole days now, ever since the big train with all the other children left without her. She clutched her rag doll, Buttons, closer to her chest. The doll's yarn hair was matted and dirty, and one button eye hung loose, but Emma loved her anyway. Buttons never said mean things or walked away when Emma tried to talk to her. "Nobody wants that lady either," Emma whispered to Buttons. "Just like nobody wanted us." The memory of standing in line with 20 other children still made her chest feel tight. Families had come to look at them like they were picking out puppies from a litter. The pretty children with clean clothes got chosen first. Then the older boys who could work on farms. Emma had watched family after family walk past her, shaking their heads. "Too young, too small. We need someone who can help with the heavy work." When the train whistle blew, signaling time to leave for the next town, Emma had chased after Buttons who'd fallen into the bushes. By the time she found her doll, the train was just a black speck, disappearing into the distance. The conductor hadn't even noticed one small girl was missing. Now Silver Creek felt bigger than the whole world. She'd been sleeping in the livery stable, curled up in the hay next to the horses, who didn't seem to mind sharing their space. During the day, she stayed hidden and watched the townfolk go about their business. Emma had learned to be invisible. When you were small and had no family, staying hidden meant staying safe. But it also meant staying hungry and lonely and scared when the sun went down. She watched the man with the loud voice, trying to sell the lady. Emma didn't understand all the words, but she understood the tone. It was the same voice the mean lady at the orphanage used when she talked about children nobody wanted to adopt. Difficult cases, the orphanage lady had called them. Some children just aren't suited for proper homes. Emma had wanted to ask what made a proper home, but asking questions usually got you extra chores and no supper. So she'd stayed quiet and hoped someone would see past her tangled hair and too small dress to the good parts underneath. The lady on the platform had kind eyes, even though they looked sad. When the wind blew her blanket, Emma could see she was shaking, but she stood up straight anyway. That took courage, and Emma recognized courage because she'd had to find lots of it inside herself these past few days. People in the crowd said cruel things about the lady. Emma's cheeks got hot listening to their whispers. Adults were supposed to be better than children, but sometimes they were meaner than the worst bullies at the orphanage. "She's all alone too," Emma told Buttons. "Maybe she needs a friend." The thought scared and excited her at the same time. Emma had tried talking to grown-ups before, but they usually shooed her away or told her to find her parents. When she explained she didn't have parents, their faces got uncomfortable and they walked away quickly. But this lady looked different. Maybe because she was standing up there all alone with nobody bidding on her. She'd understand what it felt like to be unwanted. The auction was ending. The man with the loud voice packed up his things, and the lady stepped down from the platform. She looked lost, like she didn't know where to go or what to do next. Emma knew that feeling too. Her heart beat fast as she watched the lady start walking toward the edge of town. If Emma didn't do something right now, the lady would disappear, just like the train had. And then Emma would be completely alone again. Taking a deep breath for courage, Emma stood up from behind the water trough. Her legs felt wobbly after crouching for so long, and buttons nearly slipped from her arms. The few people still in the square were busy with their own business and didn't notice one small girl stepping out of the shadows. Emma's bare feet made no sound on the dusty ground as she followed the lady. Her heart pounded so hard it hurt, but she kept walking. This felt important, like maybe it was the most important thing she'd ever do. The lady was moving slowly, like every step took great effort. Emma could see her shoulders shaking, and not just from the cold wind. "Excuse me," Emma called out, her voice barely louder than a whisper. The lady didn't hear her. Emma tried again, a little louder this time. "Excuse me, lady." The woman turned around, her gray eyes wide with surprise. Up close, Emma could see tear tracks on her cheeks, but also something gentle in her expression that made Emma's chest feel warm. "Hello there," the lady said softly. Her voice sounded like music, even though it was shaky. "Where are your parents, little one?" Emma's mouth felt dry, but she forced the words out. "I don't got any parents. The train left me behind." She paused, studying the lady's face for signs she was about to walk away like all the others. Instead, the lady knelt down in the dirt, so they were looking at each other eye to eye. "What's your name?" the lady asked. "Emma. Emma Parker." She clutched buttons tighter. "What's your name?" "I'm Catherine Morrison." The lady's voice got even softer. "You said the train left you behind?" Emma nodded. "The orphan train. I was chasing buttons when she fell, and when I got back, everyone was gone." She looked down at her dirty dress, then back up at Catherine's kind face. "Nobody wanted me anyway." Catherine's eyes got very bright, like she might cry again. But instead of walking away, she reached out and gently touched Emma's shoulder. "Oh, sweetheart, you must be so frightened." The gentle touch and kind words made Emma's own tears start falling. She'd been trying so hard to be brave, but talking to someone who understood what it felt like to be unwanted made all her scared feelings bubble up at once. "I've been hiding by the horses," Emma admitted through her tears. "I don't know where to go or what to do, and I'm really, really hungry." Catherine's face got very serious. "When did you last eat?" Emma had to think about it. "Time felt different when you were always hungry." "Maybe yesterday? I found some bread crusts behind the bakery." That made Catherine look even more worried. She glanced around the town square, then back at Emma. "I don't have much," she said honestly. "I don't even have a place to sleep tonight myself." Emma wiped her nose with the back of her hand. Here was another person with no money and nowhere to go. But somehow, that made her feel less alone, instead of more scared. "Maybe we could help each other?" Emma suggested, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. Catherine tilted her head, listening. Emma took a deep breath and asked the question that had been growing in her heart since she first saw the lady on the platform. "Can you be my mommy?" Emma's small hand slipped into Catherine's like it belonged there, warm and trusting despite the cold October wind that whipped through Silver Creek's dusty streets. The child's fingers were sticky with something sweet, and Catherine wondered when Emma had last eaten a proper meal. "I found a secret place," Emma whispered, tugging Catherine away from the empty auction platform where shame still clung like morning frost. "Nobody knows about it except me and the mice." Catherine let herself be led, her bare feet finding purchase on the rough wooden sidewalk. Each step took her further from the humiliation of standing before a crowd that had deemed her worthless, but closer to something she couldn't yet name. The blanket around her shoulders felt heavier now, weighted with the responsibility of this tiny person who had chosen her when no one else would. Emma stopped beside a narrow alley between Murphy's General Store and the barber shop. "Through here," she said, pointing to a gap in the weathered boards that looked barely wide enough for a cat. "I've been hiding here since the train left without me." The story came out in pieces as they squeezed through the opening. Emma had been on the orphan train from Kansas, heading west with 12 other children to find new families. But when the train stopped in Silver Creek for water, Emma had chased her rag doll into the bushes after it fell from the window. By the time she retrieved it, the whistle was blowing and the train was pulling away, black smoke disappearing into the endless sky. "I called and called, but they didn't hear me," Emma said matter-of-factly, as if being abandoned was just another thing that happened, like rain or wind. "So I've been waiting for someone to come get me." Behind the buildings, they found Emma's secret place, a small clearing where someone had once tried to build a house, but given up after laying the foundation. Wooden planks and scattered tools created a maze of hiding spots, and Emma had made herself a nest in the corner, using old grain sacks and her doll as a pillow. Catherine's heart clenched as she saw the careful way Emma had arranged her few possessions. 3 copper pennies lined up on a flat stone, a chipped tin cup, and a piece of hardtack wrapped in brown paper. The child had been rationing her meager supplies, making them last while she waited for rescue that might never come. "Are you hungry?" Catherine asked, though she could see the answer in Emma's hollow cheeks and the way her dress hung loose on her small frame. Emma nodded but didn't complain. "I saved some for tomorrow, though. Mama always said to save something for tomorrow." The mention of Emma's mother hung between them like a bridge spanning years of loss. Catherine settled onto one of the grain sacks, drawing Emma close beneath the blanket. "Tell me about her." "She had yellow hair like mine," Emma said, leaning against Catherine's side. "And she sang while she worked. She died of the fever last winter, and then Papa couldn't take care of me no more 'cause he had to work in the mines. He cried when the train man came to get me." Catherine felt tears she'd thought were all used up begin to gather behind her eyes. This child had already lost everything once, and now fate had abandoned her again in a strange town with nothing but her doll and her fierce hope that someone would want her. "I'm sorry about your mama," Catherine said softly. "I lost my husband last spring. He got sick real sudden, and then I couldn't pay the debts he left behind." Emma tilted her head to look up at Catherine's face. "Is that why you were on that wooden thing? Because you didn't have money?" The innocence of the question cut deeper than any of the cruel looks from the auction crowd. How could she explain to a 4-year-old that adults could be bought and sold, that desperation could reduce a person to standing naked before strangers hoping someone would see value in their suffering? Sometimes when people don't have money for food or a place to sleep, they have to do hard things, Catherine said carefully. "I thought maybe someone would give me work if they could see I was strong enough to help them." Emma seemed to consider this. "But nobody wanted to help?" "Nobody except you," Catherine admitted. "You were the only one who asked if I could be something good instead of something useful." As afternoon shadows grew longer across their hidden refuge, Catherine learned more about her unexpected companion. Emma could count to 20 and knew most of her letters. She was afraid of thunder but loved rain because it made puddles to splash in. She missed her father's laugh and the way her mother hummed lullabies, but she didn't cry about it anymore, because crying made her stomach hurt worse than hunger. "What happens now?" Emma asked, as the sun began to sink behind the mountains, painting their shelter in shades of gold and amber. Catherine pulled the child closer, feeling the sharp angles of Emma's shoulder blades through her thin dress. The question hung in the air between them, heavy with possibilities neither of them could predict. She had no money, no home, no legal right to care for this orphaned child. But Emma's faith in her felt like the first valuable thing anyone had offered in months. I don't know, Catherine said honestly, but we'll figure it out together. Emma smiled for the first time since Catherine had met her, a gap-toothed grin that transformed her solemn little face. I knew you were my mama the minute I saw you. You just looked like you needed someone to love you as much as I did. The words hit Catherine like a physical blow, not because they hurt, but because they healed something she hadn't realized was broken. She had spent months thinking about what she could offer others, her strength, her skills, her willingness to work. But Emma saw what she needed instead: someone to love, someone to protect, someone to call her by a name that mattered. As darkness fell over Silver Creek, Catherine held Emma close and listened to the child's breathing slow into sleep. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new questions about how two people with nothing could build something together. But tonight, in their makeshift shelter surrounded by abandoned dreams, Catherine felt rich in ways that had nothing to do with money. She had found her daughter, and her daughter had found her, and somehow that seemed like the most valuable transaction either of them would ever make. The morning sun painted frost patterns on the abandoned cabin's single window, like delicate lace, and Catherine traced them with her finger, while Emma slept curled against her side. 3 weeks had passed since that first night in the hidden shelter, and they had claimed this forgotten place at the edge of town as their own. Through sheer determination and Emma's endless optimism, Catherine had discovered the cabin during one of her daily walks searching for work. The door hung crooked on its hinges, and weeds grew through gaps in the floorboards. But the roof was mostly solid, and the walls kept out the worst of the October wind. The previous owner had died the winter before, leaving no family to claim the property, and the bank seemed content to let it stand empty rather than bother with repairs. "We ain't stealing if nobody wants it," Emma had declared with 4-year-old logic, and Catherine had decided that desperate times called for flexible morality. Emma stirred now, her small hand reaching instinctively for Catherine's arm even in sleep. The child had nightmares some nights, crying out for her mother or father, but she never complained during the day. Instead, she threw herself into the work of making their shelter into a home with the fierce dedication of someone who understood that happiness was something you built, not something you waited for. "Mama Cat, are you awake?" Emma's voice was still thick with sleep, but her eyes were bright with the excitement that seemed to fuel her from dawn until dark. The name had evolved naturally between them. Emma couldn't quite manage Catherine, and Mama felt too presumptuous for Catherine to claim outright. But Mama Cat struck the perfect balance, affectionate enough to feel real, playful enough to acknowledge that they were still figuring out how to be a family. "I'm awake, little bird," Catherine said, smoothing Emma's hair away from her face. The child's golden curls had grown wild and tangled, but they caught the morning light like spun sunbeams. "What's the plan for today?" Emma sat up with the sudden energy that children possessed, as if sleep was just an inconvenience between adventures. "Mrs. Patterson said she might have more sewing for you if you finished her curtains good enough. And I want to check our garden to see if anything grew yet." Their garden was more hope than reality. A small patch of dirt behind the cabin, where they had planted seeds salvaged from vegetables too rotten for Murphy's store to sell. Emma tended it with religious devotion, talking to the tiny sprouts like they were pets. Catherine didn't have the heart to tell her that winter was coming too fast for most of their plants to survive. Catherine had found work slowly, one small job at a time. Her hands, scarred from years of hard labor, proved surprisingly skilled with needle and thread. She could mend tears that other women declared hopeless, and her stitches were small and even enough to make old clothes look almost new again. Word spread quietly among Silver Creek's wives that the woman at the old Henderson place did good work for fair prices. But fairness was relative when you started with nothing. Catherine's earnings barely covered flour and beans, with occasional treats like sugar or bacon when a particularly difficult mending job paid better than expected. Emma never complained about their simple meals, but Catherine noticed how the child's eyes lit up when she managed to afford an apple or a small piece of cheese. "After we check the garden, I want to practice my letters," Emma announced, bouncing slightly on their shared bedroll. "You promised to teach me the rest of the alphabet." Catherine had fashioned a slate from a piece of smooth stone and charcoal from their fire. Emma attacked her lessons with the same enthusiasm she brought to everything else, forming wobbly letters with her tongue poking out in concentration. She was bright as summer lightning, soaking up knowledge like the dry earth absorbed rain. But their peaceful routine faced constant threats that Catherine tried to hide from Emma. Mrs. Hendricks, the banker's wife, had made pointed comments about improper arrangements when Catherine brought mending to her friends. Several of the church ladies whispered behind their hands when they passed Catherine on the street, their disapproval as sharp as winter wind. The worst part was that Catherine couldn't argue with their concerns. She had no legal right to Emma, no proof that she was fit to care for a child, no husband or family to vouch for her character. They were living in an abandoned building without permission, surviving on irregular income and stubborn hope. By any reasonable measure, their situation was precarious enough to worry anyone who cared about Emma's welfare. "Mama Cat?" Emma's voice interrupted Catherine's brooding thoughts. "Why do some people look at us funny when we go to town?" The question pierced Catherine's heart, because it meant Emma had noticed the stares and whispers despite Catherine's efforts to shield her from them. She considered lying, offering some gentle explanation that would preserve Emma's innocence a little longer. But this child had already faced enough adult realities to deserve honest answers. "Some people think families should look a certain way," Catherine said carefully. "They think little girls should have papas and mamas who are married to each other and live in proper houses with proper jobs." Emma considered this with the gravity that children brought to complicated subjects. "But we love each other. Doesn't that make us a proper family?" "I think so," Catherine said, pulling Emma into her arms. "But not everyone sees it that way." The conversation was interrupted by a knock at their crooked door, a sound that always sent Catherine's heart racing, because visitors usually meant trouble. She wrapped her shawl around her shoulders and opened the door to find Dr. Benjamin Hayes, the town's physician, holding his black medical bag and wearing an expression of professional concern. "Mrs. Morrison," he said politely, removing his hat, "I hope I'm not intruding, but I wanted to check on the child. There's been talk in town about her health and circumstances." Catherine's blood turned cold. Dr. Hayes was known as a kind man, but he was also the person most likely to report concerns about child welfare to the territorial authorities. She stepped partially in front of Emma, who had come to peek around Catherine's skirt with curious eyes. "Emma's fine," Catherine said quickly. "She's eating well, learning her letters, staying warm and clean. I'm taking good care of her." Dr. Hayes nodded thoughtfully, his gaze taking in their humble surroundings without judgment. "I'm sure you are. May I?" He gestured toward Emma, and Catherine reluctantly stepped aside. The examination was gentle but thorough. Dr. Hayes checked Emma's breathing, felt her forehead for fever, and asked her to walk across the room so he could observe her gait. Emma submitted to it all with patient curiosity, chattering about their garden and her letter lessons while the doctor worked. "She's remarkably healthy," Dr. Hayes announced finally, straightening up with a smile. "Well-nourished, alert, clearly thriving under your care. Whatever you're doing, Mrs. Morrison, it's working." Catherine felt her knees go weak with relief. But Dr. Hayes wasn't finished. "However," he continued, his tone growing more serious, "there are people in town who have expressed concerns about your situation. They worry about the long-term stability you can provide, the appropriateness of the living arrangements, the lack of legal documentation regarding Emma's care." The words Catherine had been dreading hung in the air between them, like storm clouds gathering on the horizon. She had known this moment would come, the moment when their fragile happiness would be tested by the demands of a world that valued law over love, propriety over protection. But as she looked down at Emma's trusting face, Catherine felt something harden inside her like steel forged in fire. She had found her purpose in this child's smile, her strength in Emma's need for her. Whatever came next, she wouldn't surrender without a fight. The question was, would love be enough when the law came knocking at their crooked door? The morning sun had barely touched the cabin windows when heavy boots stomped up their wooden steps. Catherine froze while braiding Emma's hair, her fingers suddenly clumsy with fear. 3 sharp knocks echoed through their small home like gunshots. "Open up! Official business!" A man's voice boomed. Emma's eyes went wide. "Mama Cat? Who's that?" Catherine's heart hammered against her ribs. She had dreaded this day for months, knowing it would come but hoping somehow it wouldn't. Her hands shook as she smoothed Emma's dress and whispered, "Stay close to me, sweetheart." The door creaked open to reveal Marshal Wade, his silver badge glinting in the morning light. Behind him stood a tall woman, dressed in black from head to toe, her face as stern as a winter storm. Her sharp gray eyes swept over their humble home like a hawk hunting mice. "Mrs. Morrison," the marshal said, tipping his hat. "This here's Miss Prudence Hartwell from the Territorial Children's Aid Society in Cheyenne." Miss Hartwell stepped forward without being invited, her black boots clicking on their wooden floor. "I've received several reports about this situation." Her lips pinched together like she'd tasted something sour. A woman with no husband, claiming to mother a child she has no legal right to keep. Catherine felt Emma's small hand slip into hers, squeezing tight. "This is my daughter," she said quietly, but her voice carried the strength of a mother bear protecting her cub. "Nonsense." Miss Hartwell pulled out a leather folder thick with official papers. "This child is a ward of the territory. She belongs to the state, not to some woman who found her wandering the streets." "I didn't find her," Catherine said, her anger starting to burn. "She found me, and I've been taking care of her ever since." Miss Hartwell walked around their small room, examining everything with cold, judging eyes. She touched their patched curtains, frowned at their simple wooden table, and wrinkled her nose at the smell of their breakfast bacon still sizzling in the pan. "A child needs proper care," Miss Hartwell declared. "Education, moral guidance, a respectable home with married parents who can provide security." Emma tugged on Catherine's skirt. "What's she talking about, Mama?" "The adults are talking, child." Miss Hartwell's voice could have frozen water in July. "You'll understand when you're older and living with a proper family." Catherine knelt down to Emma's level, ignoring the woman in black. "Remember what I told you about how some people think they know what's best for everyone else?" Emma nodded, her blue eyes serious. "You said they're usually wrong." "That's right, baby." Miss Hartwell cleared her throat loudly. "Mrs. Morrison, I'm not here to debate philosophy with a 4-year-old. I'm here to collect this child and place her in a suitable home." "She has a suitable home." Catherine stood up, her whole body trembling with fury. "Look around you. She's clean, fed, loved, and happy. What more does a child need? A father, for starters." Ms. Hartwell's words hit like a slap. Respectability, social standing, a future that doesn't involve washing other people's dirty laundry. Marshal Wade shifted uncomfortably. "Now, Miss Hartwell, Catherine here's done right by the little one. Half the town can vouch for that. The town's opinion doesn't matter when it comes to territorial law." Miss Hartwell snapped. "I have a family in Denver, ready to adopt her immediately. The Weatherbys are prominent citizens with a large house, servants, and the means to give her every advantage." Catherine felt like someone had punched her in the stomach. Denver was 3 days' ride away. She'd never see Emma again. "I don't want advantages," Emma said, her small voice surprisingly strong. "I want my mama." Miss Hartwell ignored her completely. "Children don't know what they want. That's why adults must make decisions for them." "And what about what I want?" Catherine asked. "Don't I have any say in this?" "You're not her legal guardian. You have no rights here whatsoever." Miss Hartwell's smile was as cold as winter wind. The Weatherby family specifically requested a young child to raise as their own. They've been waiting months for the right opportunity. Catherine's mind raced. There had to be something she could do, some way to fight this. What if I adopted her legally? What if I went through all the proper steps? Miss Hartwell laughed, a harsh sound like breaking glass. "You? A woman alone with no husband? No property? No social standing? The territory doesn't approve adoptions for people like you. People like me? Poor people. Desperate people. People who live on the edges of society and think they can play house with abandoned children. Miss Hartwell pulled out more papers. I have the authority to remove her today. Right now. Emma started crying, pressing her face against Catherine's legs. I don't want to go. Please don't make me go. Catherine picked her up, holding her tight. Emma's tears soaked through her dress, but she didn't care. Shh, baby. It's going to be okay somehow. No, it's not, Emma sobbed. She's going to take me away from you. Miss Hartwell watched this scene with no emotion on her face at all. The longer you drag this out, the harder it will be for the child to adjust. Separation is always difficult, but delay only makes it worse. Marshall Wade looked troubled. Maybe we could wait a day or two? Give Catherine a chance to what? Find a husband overnight? Become wealthy by tomorrow? Miss Hartwell's voice dripped with scorn. Marshall, I have my orders and a family waiting in Denver. The Weatherby carriage will arrive this afternoon to collect her. Catherine felt her world crumbling around her like a house made of cards. Everything she'd built with Emma, all their happy mornings and quiet evenings, all their dreams and plans, none of it mattered to this woman in black who saw only paperwork and regulations. Please, she whispered, give me more time. Let me prove I can take care of her. You've had months to prove yourself, and look where it's gotten you. Miss Hartwell gestured around their small cabin. Still poor, still alone, still unsuitable. Emma lifted her tear-stained face. But we're happy. Mama Cat reads to me every night, and she teaches me about flowers and cooking and how to be kind to people. She never yells at me, and she hugs me when I have bad dreams. The Weatherbys will provide you with proper education and moral instruction, Miss Hartwell said coldly. You'll have your own room, new dresses, and the chance to become a refined young lady. I don't want to be refined, Emma declared. I want to be with my mama. But Catherine could see in Miss Hartwell's eyes that nothing Emma said would matter. This woman had made up her mind before she'd even knocked on their door. The battle was already lost before it had begun. Catherine's world stopped spinning when she heard those words. The afternoon carriage from Denver meant she had only hours left with Emma, maybe the last hours they'd ever spend together. But as she looked into her daughter's frightened eyes, something fierce and protective rose up inside her like a wildfire. You want to talk about what's best for her? Catherine's voice grew stronger with each word. Then let me tell you what I know about Emma that your Denver family doesn't. Miss Hartwell rolled her eyes. Sentimental attachments don't provide. She's afraid of thunderstorms but loves the sound of rain on the roof, Catherine interrupted, her voice cutting through the room like a blade. She saves the last bite of her supper for the stray cat that sleeps under our porch. She knows every bird that nests in the oak tree by the creek, and she's named them all. Emma nodded eagerly. There's Charlie the Blue Jay and Mrs. Robin and the twins. She hums while she works. Always the same tune her mother must have sung to her before she died. Catherine's voice broke slightly, but she pushed on. She reads better than most grown-ups in this town because we practice every single night by candlelight. She helps me with the washing not because I make her, but because she wants to contribute to our family. Miss Hartwell tapped her foot impatiently. Pretty words don't change the law. And she has nightmares about being left behind again. Catherine's words hit the room like thunder. She wakes up crying, terrified that one morning she'll be alone again like she was before we found each other. How's your Denver family going to handle that? Do they know she needs someone to check on her 3 times every night? Do they know she can't sleep without her rag doll and a cup of water by her bed? Marshall Wade cleared his throat. Catherine's got a point, Miss Hartwell. The child seems mighty attached here. Children adapt, Miss Hartwell said firmly. It's what they do. Some wounds don't heal just because adults say they should, Catherine shot back. Emma's been abandoned once already. She was 4 years old, wandering the streets alone, hungry and scared. I found her hiding behind the livery stable after the orphan train left without her. Emma buried her face deeper into Catherine's shoulder, remembering that terrible day. She asked me to be her mother because no one else wanted either of us. And you know what? That was the luckiest day of my life, because I got the most wonderful daughter any woman could ask for. Enough! Miss Hartwell's voice cracked like a whip. Your feelings don't matter here. Only the child's welfare matters. And a proper two-parent home with financial security is what's best for her future. Is it? Catherine challenged. Or is it just what looks best on your paperwork? Before Miss Hartwell could answer, Emma wriggled down from Catherine's arms and marched right up to the stern woman in black. Her small chin jutted out with determination that surprised everyone in the room. Lady, you don't know nothing about me, Emma declared, her hands on her tiny hips. You don't know that I like pancakes but not syrup, or that I'm scared of spiders but not of snakes. You don't know that I can help Mama Cat fix almost anything that breaks, or that I remember every story she tells me. Miss Hartwell looked down at the small girl with annoyance. Child, this conversation is between the adults. Well, I'm the one you want to take away, so maybe I should get to talk too. Emma's voice rose with each word. Mama Cat loves me just like I am. She don't try to make me different, or better, or refined, or whatever that means. She just loves me. Catherine felt tears stinging her eyes, proud of her daughter's courage but terrified it wouldn't matter. Love doesn't put food on the table or clothes on your back, Miss Hartwell said coldly. But I got food and clothes, Emma protested. Look, she spun around to show off the dress Catherine had sewn from flour sacks, decorated with small flowers embroidered by hand. Mama made this just for me, with pockets for my treasures and everything. Miss Hartwell examined the dress with critical eyes. Flour sacks are not proper material for a young lady's clothing. They're not flour sacks anymore, Emma said proudly. They're my dress that my mama made with her own hands because she loves me. Catherine knelt beside Emma, her heart breaking. Sweetheart, sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes the grown-ups have rules that— No! Emma stamped her foot. Love is everything. It's what makes us a family. Marshall Wade removed his hat, running his fingers through his gray hair. Miss Hartwell, maybe we should consider what the child wants. The child wants candy for breakfast and to stay up all night. That doesn't mean we give it to her. Miss Hartwell checked her pocket watch. The Weatherby carriage will be here within the hour. I suggest you help the child pack her belongings instead of filling her head with impossible dreams. Catherine stood up slowly, every muscle in her body tense. What if she doesn't want to go? What if she runs away? What if you have to drag her kicking and screaming to that carriage? Is that what's best for her? If necessary, yes. Miss Hartwell's answer was like ice water. Sometimes children must be protected from their own poor judgment. And sometimes adults need to be protected from theirs, a new voice said from the doorway. Everyone turned to see Dr. Hayes standing in the entrance, his medical bag in one hand and a leather folder in the other. Behind him stood Mrs. Chen from the laundry, old Pete the blacksmith, and several other townspeople Catherine recognized. Miss Hartwell straightened. Doctor, this is an official proceeding. I'll thank you not to interfere. Dr. Hayes stepped inside, his kind eyes taking in the scene, Emma clinging to Catherine, tears on both their faces, and Miss Hartwell standing rigid with her official papers. I'm not here to interfere, he said calmly. I'm here as a witness to character. You see, I've been watching this family for months now, and I have some observations that might interest the territorial authorities. Miss Hartwell's confidence wavered slightly. What kind of observations? The kind that matter when determining what's truly best for a child. Dr. Hayes opened his folder. Shall we discuss Emma's health records? Her educational progress? The community support this family has built? Catherine felt a flicker of hope, but she was afraid to believe it. Too much had already gone wrong today. Or, Dr. Hayes continued, his voice growing stronger, shall we discuss the legal options you apparently haven't explained to Mrs. Morrison? Miss Hartwell's face went pale. What legal options? Dr. Hayes smiled, and for the first time since the knock on the door, Catherine thought maybe this story might not end the way she feared. The door burst open with such force that it slammed against the cabin wall, making Emma jump behind Catherine's skirt. But instead of more trouble, familiar faces filled the doorway like sunshine breaking through storm clouds. Dr. Hayes stepped inside first, his black medical bag in one hand and official papers in the other. His usually calm face showed the kind of determination that meant business. Behind him came Mrs. Chen from the Chinese laundry, her small hands wringing her apron but her eyes blazing with protective fire. Old Pete the blacksmith followed, his massive frame filling the doorway, while young Reverend Miller squeezed past him, his collar slightly crooked from hurrying. Miss Hartwell's mouth opened and closed like a fish pulled from water. She clearly hadn't expected half the town to show up at this tiny cabin on the edge of nowhere. "Pardon our interruption, Miss Hartwell," Dr. Hayes said, tipping his hat with perfect politeness that somehow felt dangerous. "But we couldn't help hearing voices raised, and in a small town like Silver Creek, we look after our own." The marshal shifted his weight from foot to foot, suddenly looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. His star caught the morning light streaming through the window, but it didn't shine as brightly as it had when he'd first knocked. "Gentlemen, this is official business," Miss Hartwell snapped, clutching her papers tighter. "This child needs proper placement with a respectable family who can provide for her future." Mrs. Chen took a step forward, her broken English somehow more powerful than perfect words. "I watch this child every day. She helped me sort buttons, so careful, so gentle. Never take what not hers. Always say please and thank you. Good heart, this little one. Good mama, too." Emma peeked out from behind Catherine, her blue eyes wide with wonder. She'd never seen grown-ups stand up for her before, except for Mama Cat. The feeling was strange and warm, like drinking hot cocoa on a cold day. Pete cleared his throat, a sound like rocks tumbling down a mountain. "Ma'am, with all respect, I've lived in this territory for 20 years. Seen families that looked perfect on paper turn out rotten as old meat, and I've seen love grow in the most unlikely places." He gestured around the small cabin with hands that could bend iron. "This here's one of those unlikely places where something beautiful happened." Miss Hartwell's sharp eyes darted around the room, taking in the mended furniture and clean floors. Everything was poor but spotless, humble but full of care. She could see Emma's drawings pinned to the walls, stick figures of a woman and child holding hands under a smiling sun. "The Weatherby family in Denver has means, education, social standing," she insisted, but her voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. "They can give this child advantages you people couldn't possibly understand." Reverend Miller stepped forward, his young face earnest and kind. "Miss Hartwell, I've been a minister for only 2 years, but I've learned something important about families. They're not built with money or social standing. They're built with love, patience, and daily acts of kindness." He smiled at Emma, who was slowly creeping out from her hiding place. "I've watched Catherine teach Emma to read by firelight because they couldn't afford lamp oil. I've seen them share their last piece of bread with stray cats. If that's not Christian charity, then I don't know what is." Dr. Hayes nodded approvingly. "Speaking of daily acts of kindness, when my wife Sarah was sick with fever last month, these two brought soup to our door every single day. Emma would sit by Sarah's bedside and tell her stories about the clouds while Catherine helped with the washing. They asked for nothing in return. And when that terrible storm hit in February," Pete added, "Catherine opened her door to anyone who needed shelter. Didn't matter that she barely had enough space for herself and Emma. 3 families stayed here that night, and she made sure everyone was fed and warm before she even thought about her own comfort." Catherine felt heat rising in her cheeks. She wasn't used to hearing her actions praised like this. For months, she'd simply done what needed doing, taking care of Emma and trying to help their neighbors when she could. She'd never thought of it as anything special. Miss Hartwell looked around the room again, her expression troubled. The marshal was now studying his boots like they held the secrets of the universe. Outside, More townspeople had gathered. Catherine could see their shadows through the window, waiting to see what would happen to the little family they'd come to love. "The law requires proper documentation," Miss Hartwell said finally. But her tone had changed. She sounded tired now, like a woman carrying a burden too heavy for her shoulders. "Without legal adoption papers, I have no choice but to remove the child to approved placement." Dr. Hayes smiled, and suddenly the room felt lighter. "You're absolutely right about legal documentation." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick folder, "which is why I stopped by the territorial courthouse yesterday and filed these." Catherine's heart nearly stopped. "Dr. Hayes, what are you saying?" "I'm saying I've prepared adoption papers, naming you as Emma's legal guardian, with myself as sponsor and financial backer." His kind eyes twinkled with satisfaction. "The territory recognizes such arrangements when a respected citizen vouches for the adopting party's character and ability to provide care." Emma's gasp of joy was so loud, it seemed to echo off the cabin walls. She launched herself at Dr. Hayes, wrapping her small arms around his legs. "Does this mean I can stay with Mama Cat forever and ever?" "If that's what you both want," he said, patting her head gently. "The paperwork is all legal and proper, filed with the territorial government in Cheyenne." Miss Hartwell stared at the documents Dr. Hayes handed her, her fingers tracing the official seals and signatures. Her face showed a mixture of surprise and something that might have been relief. "This is highly irregular," she said slowly. "Maybe," Reverend Miller said with a gentle smile. "But sometimes irregular is exactly what God intended." The marshal finally looked up from his boots. "Well then, if the paperwork's in order and the town supports it, I reckon there's nothing more for us to do here." He touched his hat brim to Catherine. "Ma'am, you've got good people looking out for you." As the officials prepared to leave, Mrs. Chen pressed a small wrapped package into Catherine's hands. "For Emma," she whispered. "New hair ribbons. Pretty girls should have pretty things." Pete ruffled Emma's hair with surprising gentleness for such big hands. "You ever need anything fixed around here, you just holler. Got tools? Got time? Got two hands that know how to use them." Dr. Hayes lingered after the others had gone. "Catherine, I hope you don't mind my interference. I've been planning this for weeks, ever since I saw how happy Emma was here. Some families are made by law, and some are made by love. Yours was made by love, and now it's protected by law too." Catherine's eyes filled with tears she didn't bother to hide. "I don't know how to thank you. Any of you. I never expected." "That's the thing about good people," he said, heading for the door. "They show up when you need them most, even when you don't expect them to." 6 months later, spring painted Wyoming territory in colors so bright they almost hurt to look at. Emma ran through the meadow behind their cabin, her new blue dress, a gift from Mrs. Chen, fluttering like butterfly wings. Her laughter carried on the warm air, mixing with the sound of meadowlarks and the distant lowing of cattle. Catherine sat on the porch steps, a basket of mending beside her. Dr. Hayes had become one of her regular customers, along with half the town it seemed. Her reputation for fine needlework had spread, and now she had more work than she could handle. The irony wasn't lost on her. The same hands that no one would bid on at auction were now sought after by the finest families in 3 counties. "Mama Cat, look what I found." Emma's voice bubbled with excitement as she ran up the path, her apron full of wildflowers. The same kind of daisies she'd picked that first day, but these were fresh and perfect, their white petals bright as new snow. "They're beautiful, sweetheart." Catherine accepted the bouquet with the same ceremony she'd shown 6 months ago, when everything was uncertain and scary. Now the gesture felt like a celebration, a reminder of how far they'd come. Emma plopped down beside her on the warm wooden steps, her small body radiating contentment. At almost 5 years old now, she was taller and rounder, her face glowing with health and happiness. The hollow-cheeked, frightened child from the auction day was just a memory. "Mrs. Patterson says I'm the best reader in the whole school," Emma announced proudly. She says maybe I could even be a teacher someday. Like her. Catherine's heart swelled with pride. The one-room schoolhouse had opened its doors to Emma without question, and she'd thrown herself into learning, with the hunger of someone making up for lost time. Books were still precious and scarce, but Dr. Hayes had started lending them volumes from his own collection, and Emma devoured each one like candy. A teacher sounds wonderful, Catherine agreed, smoothing Emma's hair. The golden curls were longer now, always decorated with pretty ribbons that Miss Chen seemed to produce like magic. You could teach other children to love books the way you do. Or maybe I could be a doctor, like Dr. Hayes. He says ladies can be doctors now in some places. Emma's blue eyes sparkled with possibilities that seemed endless as the prairie sky. I could take care of people and make them feel better. The sound of hoofbeats interrupted their conversation. Dr. Hayes rode up their path on his steady brown mare, his medical bag strapped behind his saddle. But today he wasn't coming for business. Catherine could tell by the way he was smiling. "Good afternoon, ladies," he called, dismounting with the easy grace of a man who'd spent most of his life on horseback. "Emma, how's that arithmetic coming along?" "I can add numbers up to 100 now." Emma jumped up to show him her slate, covered with carefully written sums. "And I know my times tables through 5. Impressive. He examined her work with the seriousness it deserved. "Keep this up, and you'll be smarter than me before long." Catherine laughed. "She already asks questions I can't answer. Yesterday, she wanted to know why the sky is blue and where baby animals come from." "Curious minds are the best kind," Dr. Hayes said, settling onto the porch railing. "Speaking of curiosity, I have news that might interest you both. There's talk of building a real library in Silver Creek. The territorial government approved funding, and they'll need someone to help organize the books and teach people to read." Catherine's needle paused mid-stitch. "That sounds wonderful. The town could use more opportunities for learning. I was thinking," he continued carefully, "someone with your skills and Emma's love of books might be perfect for such a position. It would pay well, and Emma could help after school. Think of all the children you could teach to read." The idea was so beautiful it took Catherine's breath away. To spend her days surrounded by books, helping others discover the joy of reading, seemed almost too good to be true. She looked at Emma, who was practically bouncing with excitement. "Could we really do that, Mama Cat? Could we help other kids learn to read like you taught me?" "We could try," Catherine said softly. The future suddenly felt full of possibilities she'd never dared to imagine. Dr. Hayes pulled out his pocket watch, checking the time. "I should get going. Mrs. Morrison is expecting her third baby any day now. But I wanted to ask if you'd both like to come to dinner Sunday. Sarah's been practicing a new recipe for apple pie, and she could use honest opinions." "We'd love to," Catherine replied. The doctor and his wife had become like family, always including them in town gatherings and celebrations. It still amazed her sometimes how quickly loneliness could transform into belonging. After he left, Catherine and Emma sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple. The cabin that had once felt like a desperate shelter now felt like home. The garden behind it grew vegetables and flowers in neat rows, tended by 4 willing hands. Inside, Emma's drawings covered the walls like wallpaper, and Catherine's sewing corner was organized with the efficiency of a real business. "Mama Cat," Emma said quietly, leaning against Catherine's shoulder, "do you ever think about that day when we first met?" "Every single day," Catherine admitted. "Best decision I ever made, coming down from that platform to talk to you. I knew you were my real mama the minute I saw you," Emma said with the absolute certainty of childhood. "You looked sad and lonely, just like me, but you also looked kind. I could tell by your eyes." Catherine remembered that day. The shame, the fear, the crushing certainty that she was worth nothing to anyone. Now she understood that worth couldn't be measured in dollar bills or the approval of strangers. It was measured in quiet moments like this, in Emma's laughter echoing across the meadow, in the trust of a child who'd chosen her when no one else would. "You saved me, you know," Catherine whispered into Emma's hair. "I thought I was worthless that day at the auction. But you saw something in me that I couldn't see myself." "You saved me too," Emma replied. "We saved each other." As darkness settled over Wyoming territory, Catherine lit the lamp, and they went inside to read together before bed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new joys, but tonight they were complete. In a world that had once rejected them both, they'd found something more valuable than gold. They'd found each other. The silver locket Catherine wore caught the lamplight, no longer a symbol of loss, but a reminder that the most precious things in life often come disguised as endings. Sometimes, what looks like the worst day of your life is actually the first day of everything you never knew you wanted. Outside their window, Silver Creek settled into peaceful sleep, secure in the knowledge that some stories have the happiest endings of all.